So we're in the middle of discussing the Heilige Aluchas of the Heilige Cholent, Shabbos Kodesh. Yesterday we started with some of the problems of number one, not necessarily in that order, of the lid. That was one of the shaylas. We discussed adding the water, whether it's cooked or not, and be'ikah, the shayla of megis, the shayla of mixing. Let's move on, Rabbi Isai, to some of the related questions that we have to get to. And that is as follows. One of the very first questions we have to deal with today is the shayla of how exactly are you putting the water in. Yesterday we talked about the kolba and the inyan of pouring it slowly, and if you're pouring it on the gas, on the fire, but it's definitely best to take it off the fire and then pour in the liquid. This way you don't have a shayla of hagosa. But
is it a difference between a crock pot and
there is no difference between if the cholent is in a crock pot or if it is on a gas or if it's on a hot plate. There's absolutely no difference. There may be differences coming up soon when we talk about chazorah. But klapi putting the water in, no. Again, making this clear. It's definitely better to take it off and then add the water. But again, if you can put it in while it's on, and you can pour it in slowly. Now, moving on to the shayla of adding the water inside. So what's the shayla? The shayla is really like this. The shayla is, are you allowed, let's make a case like this. You're allowed to transfer the pot of cholent from one fire to another fire. Well, in a minute we'll talk about the blach sugya. But that's not a problem. Now, let's say, for example, I had two hot plates in front of me, and I take the cholent from one hot plate, and I just directly, I pick it up, put it straight onto the second hot plate. That's about the mutter, right? I didn't do anything. Toivi, maskim? That's no problem. I didn't do anything. That's not a problem. I'm allowed to go me'esh le'esh. That's what the Ramah tells us in Simon, Reish Nun Gimel. Very good. And therefore, there's no problem with doing that on Shabbos. The only shayla is if you change the utensil in between. Meaning, if I take the chicken soup and I put it from one to the other, I didn't do anything. That's for sure mutter. But what if I take the chicken soup from the pot, pour it into an empty pot, and put the new empty pot on the second hot plate? Why am I doing that? Who cares? Is that mutter? Is that the same thing? Or maybe not. So here we have a machloikas hachoinim. The Magen Avraham famously is machmir. The Balatanya and Shulchan Aruch also paskins that way, that he's machmir and holds you're not allowed to do that. Only the original kli. If you put it into a new kli, it's a naya zach. It's a shayla of putting it on for the very first time, and that's also the Mishnah Berurah Lemaisa is makel in Simon and Gimel. And the Shatzim brings it down, you can be makel. And therefore, why am I bringing this into you? Because very simple. What if you take, for example, not only did you take the chicken soup from one pot and put it into a new pot, but what if, for example, let's take the next stage, I dunk a ladle into the one chicken soup, put it into a new pot, and then put that new pot on. According to Mishnah Berurah, it will be mutter. What's the shayla? How shayla is when you fill up the cholent with water, how are you doing it? You're generally not tipping the urn straight into the cholent. You're going to put a cup under the spout, you're going to put some water in the cup, and then you're going to tip it in. Is that our shayla? That's the question. Is that mutter or not? Is that called being put into a new utensil, which is then putting into the cholent? It's even worse than the case before, right? The case before is I'm taking the chicken soup from the pot, putting it into a new pot, and putting the new pot on the fire. Here, I'm putting from the hot water urn into an empty cup, and from the empty cup into the cholent. It's like nat bar nat. It's like 3 stages away. Is that in with me? Hello? With me, right? It's not, understand what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So the shayla is, are you allowed to do that? Or does it have to come directly from the thing itself, from the urn itself? So somebody was once going to Rav Elyashiv's Zatzal, and he says to me, I'm going to Rav Elyashiv, I'm going to ask a few questions. Do you have any important questions that I can ask? And I asked him this shayla. Why? Why did I ask him this shayla? What's the big deal? First of all, number one, maybe it's asa, and maybe I'm not allowed to pour it into a cup and then pour it into the cholent, which is going to make problems. How am I going to fill up the crock pot with water? So you could say, I could just take the crock pot or the pot, put it under the urn, and just put it directly in. What's the problem? If I do that?
The heat goes up, it makes flesh.
Oh, Tazarika, holding! You're obviously learning Simon study base. Baruch Hashem. That's what you're up to? Not yet. Chazorah. In the Chazorah. We finished in the Chazorah. You're not up to study base yet? No. Al Kaponim, the problem is like this. The makor of the shayla, by the way, is a Mishnah. It's way from the Mishnayos. The Mishnah says in Mesechtus Machshirin. You up to there yet? Okay. So the Mishnah says in Mesechtus Machshirin, if you've got a mikveh house with some tumah, so the zayah, the steam, spreads everywhere. The question is, and the Rosh comes along the Heilige Rosh, and the Rosh says, who adin with any food? That the zayah, the steam from the food has a din of the food. Comes along Levi Yitzchak and says, "Ich habe a problem." If you take the crock pot and you put it right under the urn and you open up the spout, you open up the lid of the thing, or whoosh, the steam goes up, boom, you got a spout that is now fleishiks. Tomorrow morning you want to make a cover with a bistel milch, you have a problem.
Okay, so open it up before. It's not a big
We'll open it up before, but it's still steaming. Can I know? It's just steaming, I'm all over the place.
Wait a minute, wait 2 minutes, you'll be fine.
I mean, there's no steam b'chalal.
Not enough to make it. How much?
Pour it into a cup first? Okay, no, that's the shaila. Do I have to pour in a cup, or can I even put it under, or it makes it fleishik?
Epstein has an amount. How much is to make it fleishik?
Yeah, but there's a big shaila about this. Yaakov, Ataiti? So,
L'chorah makes sense.
L'chorah makes sense?
Yeah, otherwise we're going.
So I want to tell you 2 things. First of all, this fellow that I sent to Rav Elyashiv, so he told me that he asked Rav Elyashiv this shaila, and Rav Elyashiv told him that if you're worried about the zayah, then you can use a cup. Which means, Eino Chanami using a cup is a little bit of a shaila. But if you're worried about the zayah and you're doing it for that cheshbon, then you can use a cup. Now I will tell you, without going into detail now, because it's not really our sugya, but we over here in this base medrash are not so worried about zayah. We're not so worried about zayah, mainly because of chuvas in the Bach, which is also brought down in the Aruch HaShulchan, and Kach Gebalti from the Yeshiva of Scheinberg Zatzal, is that zayah that the Chazal were talking about was fierce. Right, the Pesach Tshuva brings at the end of Simon Study Base the same thing. It has to have it's got no mokum nispashit. That means it's confined space, steam. Steam that's confined, that's the shaila. Steam that, there's an English word and I'm going to get it wrong. Help me out, Daniel, no? If it dissipates, no, it adds another S, no? Okay, whatever it is. What's that? Dissipates, yeah? We're in the same school, I should know this thing. If it dissipates, no, then what? Sounds good, that one, no? He's going to say, what's going on over here? I sent you to a good, decent school, and that's what you came out with. Anyway, if it dissipates, so then it's got no koyach anymore. So, Lemaisa, we're not so worried about steam. It's okay. I remember in the old building, we used to have a very, very choshev koilel who were learning Basav HaCholel for smicha. And the Rosh Koilel was, we're giving them a share, and he told them that the urn, mamash, you can't use it if you're milchiks, because of the fleishiks, and people do all sorts of things over there, and it's a problem. And I told them in this base medrash and this yeshiva, we're not worried about it because of the Chuvas Habach, because of the Aruch HaShulchan, because of Scheinberg, that then the steam hasn't got such a much of a koyach. When, for example, that's the shaila, everyone's busy with the spices. People have different spices and everything. So that it's very good, by the way, to have different spices because it can get dirty on the outside, right? So that stomachs are greasy and all sorts of things. But if that's not the problem, we're not so worried about steam. We're not so worried about steam going in. It's got no mokumness. It's got mokumness, basha, it dissipates, and therefore there's no problem. There's no koyach that it has to ask or anything. When you close the oven, no, because then it gets burnt up. So you don't have steam there also. Maybe the only problem you have at the time with steam is when you got a pressure cooker. The old-fashioned pressure cookers with a little piece on the top, it goes boom, boom, you're going to be petrified of this thing. That, you hold a ladle over there. This I hear, maybe, Efsha over there, you have a problem with steam. But in a regular case, you're not so worried about steam. Going back to our shaila, it comes out like Lochanamaisa that you will be allowed to take a cup, fill it up from the urn, and pour it into the cholent. But you've got to put it straight into the cholent. You can't put it down first, which we'll get to in a moment. You can't put things down. But if you take the cup, pour it into the thing, put it straight into the cholent, then you are okay. Shimon was correct, by the way. There is such a eitzah. If you do want to put it straight under, I wouldn't suggest putting it under and then lifting off the lid, because then whoosh. That's not Beseda. Take off the lid before, let the whoosh happen first, and then put it under the urn in that case. Okay, everybody say? Let's move on a bissel weiter. Some of the other shilas that we have to deal with. And that is number one. Shkoyach. Levi Yitzchak comes along and says, how are you putting the lid back on? Right, you take off the lid, you serve a bissel cholent, right, for the oilam. The problem is it takes time sometimes. The kids, they want to choose this potato and that bean. It takes time, right? By the time you put the lid back on, what's the problem? The problem is the liquid, the condensation, or the liquid itself that was on the lid is going to be replaced back onto the cholent. That is not often, sometimes it could be cold. If it's cold, you have a problem with bishul. It was previously cooked, because it came from a cholent that was previously cooked, and lemaisa ain bishalacha bishul, but however by davalach we said, by liquid, there is bishalacha bishul, at least the chumen machik, because we've shown the halacha brings all the shittis Rishonim. We're not going into that now, the beginning of Shen Chesiv Dalet, but I'll upon him, the halacha is, if you put the lid back on, you got a problem with bishul. So what do? You have to wipe it down. So Rav Moshe, where is he? Rav Moshe came along and said there's a major nafkamina. Okay, I'll give you an example. That cup that you use to fill up the water for the cholent, Same shaila. You pour in a cup, you put down the cup. And you're like, it needs more water. It needs more, I didn't put enough in. So I want to fill up the cup again, but that cup is still wet. So I have the same shaila then. The liquid that's still left over at the bottom of the cup is now cold. Yesh bishul acha bishul b'davalach. What's that? Happens by Shabbos morning. The same thing when you make a tea with the Kli Shlishi. Very good. Now that we know what Kli Shlishi is, right? Okay. So comes along with Moshe, and Moshe in Igros Moshe, he says there's a big nafkamina. If you rinsed the lid, or by the way, I'm going to add to this one the ladle as well. Same thing, when you take the ladle and you put it down and then you want to have another scoop and now it's cold. So if you rinsed it under the faucet, under the tap, then that liquid was never cooked. And if that liquid was never cooked, to immerse it back into the cholent or to put the lid back on or to use the cup again, bang, you have a problem with liquid that was never cooked. You have to dry it out completely. Not a single drop left. It says, well, Moshe, but in a situation where it's only a small amount, you don't need it, you don't want it, it's like ichvaslei, I have no shy. You think I want the droplets that are over there? They have no meaning to me. What do? It says, well, Moshe, give it a bissel of a shake and go weiter. That means take the lid and give it a shake. It will still be a little bit wet, but the main droplets are gone. Who are in the ladle? Give it a bit of a shake. Give the cup a little bit of a shake out, and then you could use it again. Even though there's a little bit of droplets that are in there. Why? Because number one, it's previously cooked. So bishul acha bishul is already a machlokas rishonim, plus I don't need it and I'm not interested in it and therefore it'll be okay. But again, that's only if the liquid in there was previously cooked. If it was not previously cooked, then obviously it's going to be problematic.
Why do you need a shake there?
Just to get off the ikka, the main ones. It shouldn't have so much. That's all. It should be not choshev. It should be a small amount. That's all. You're right. If I didn't shake it, probably would be okay. But in a case though, Moshe says give it a bit of a shake first. So give the lid. Now, by the way, this is all if the liquid that's there is what temperature?
Cool.
Cool.
Not yet, let us play. Or
You Sfadi?
as long as if it's hot, it doesn't make a difference. Put it back either way.
If it's hot for sure. What's the halachic definition of hot? What's that? As cold as it gets?
13 degrees.
So first of all, like this, I want to tell you there's a major nafkamina. Again, we're going through sugyas of here that could take days. There's a major nafkamina to the Shulchan Aruch Ramah Ashkenazim v'Sfaradim about this halacha. What is the halacha? What's considered halachically cold? According to the Sfaradim, the halacha is, let's go into temperatures right now. There's a wonderful book, Kashrus in the Kitchen. The beginning over there, it tells you all about the different temperatures that you could use. But we're not going into that. According to the Sfaradim, the temperature that's considered to be halachic cold is under Yad Lettuce Boy, right? 45 degrees, whatever you want to say. Under Yad Lettuce Boy has a din of cold, which means if the residue is less than that degree, that is considered to be halachically cold, and you have a problem of reheating it. Ashkenazim came along with a gavaldige kula. It's a ramah. Now, as long as it's still nice and warm, that I would serve it that way, that's considered to be hot, like these halachas. And therefore there's no problem. So if the residue in the cup that you use on the urn, or in the lid, or in the ladle, is nice and warm, hot, boiling? No, but it's nice and warm, then you're okay. Then you don't have to shake it off. That's no problem whatsoever. That's a kula that the Ashkenazim have. Sfarim don't have that kula. Now, one last thing Rabbi is saying, and that is a blech. A couple of last things. We'll move into the drabonans maybe now. And that is the issa of chazorah, which means that when you take the cholent off, how are you putting it back on? What's the problem? The problem is when you take off a cholent and you put it back on, it's mechsikim avashal. It looks like you are cooking. When someone will walk in your house and see you putting in an urn, a crock pot, into the actual metal piece that cooks it, they would say, hey, this guy's cooking on Shabbos, mechsikim avashal. So it's an issa d'rabbanan for a person to do something that looks like cooking. Mimela, when you take it off and you want to put it back on, you have a problem. What problem do you have? The problem of putting something on a mokum of eish. Right? That would apply in many situations. It might not apply on a hot plate, because most people that we know of do not cook on a hot plate. So if you haven't got a problem, in a crock pot, for sure you have a problem. So how you take it off? So there are 5 conditions that we know of. The 5 conditions are, number 1, the 2 of bishul, has to be in a special called tzorkoi, it has to be fully cooked. You cannot put the crock pot back on if it's not fully cooked, right? There's a shaila exactly what that means. There's a big shaila with the bones, right? Sheinberg has a whole tshuva about this, whether you've got bones in there that are not fully cooked, but everything else is fully cooked. But on kaponim in a regular case, if it's fully cooked, If everyone would eat it that way, you could put it back. Number one. Number two, has to be hot, because if it's not hot, if it's cooled down to the level that you wouldn't serve it because it's lukewarm, even Ashkenazim are not allowed to reheat it. Have you ever problem? So those two are bishul. Then we've got the three Durabbanons. What are the three Durabbanons? It's generally the Ramah. I mean, the Gemara goes through the Shais. We learned this in Daf Yomi, in the Masechta Shabbos, and the Ramah in 7 Vaishno Gimel C base goes with most of the Shais of the Gemara L'Chumra, as they pass in the Rambam, which basically means that number one, Oida biyadai, which means it's got to be in your hand. That means the cholent the whole time has to be in your hand. Now, what does it mean in your hand? Rabbi Moshe has a good tshuva on this. What's the halacha of in your hand? Does it have to be suspended in the air? Do I have to hold the crock pot in the air the whole time? So there is a perish Mishnayos like Rambam that wants to mash with the way. Another reason why you have to learn Mishnayos, and because of that, you have to see. It has to hold it the whole time. It has to be a way that if I would let go, it would fall. The Maisa of Moshe and others hold you don't go with that one. As long as you're holding it, even if it's resting on the counter, but you're holding on to the handle, not the lid. Big mistake. I once heard that from a boy. He says to me, I heard from someone that if you hold the lid, then it's okay. No shaykhs. Pure Amaratzis. Rubbish, and therefore it's problematic. You've got to hold the pot. You can hold one. You hold your hand one side of the pot, take off the lid, scoop it out, whatever it is. It's got to be oida biyadai. What's the mile of oida biyadai? That when I put it back, it's a continuation. It's not a brand new putting on, and therefore it's okay. Put the lid on the counter, keep holding on to it with one hand, scoop out whatever I need, put the lid back on, off you go, back on, right? Send to a crock pot, hot plate, gas, and enough kamina. What's that?
What do you really gain by?
You gain by oida biyadai. The Ramah says oida biyadai. What does that mean? It's still in your hand. That means I never really took it off. It's still be'etzem connected to the original source, and when I put it back on, it doesn't look like a new putting on. It's a continuation. That's number one. Number two, machshava, I have to think about it, meaning daito lachsa, Ramah says, which means I have to have thought about it. If Dan Fisher came up with a gavaldik gazach, he wanted a taina one time. All you have to do is you get up once a year and you say, Rabbi, say every single time I take the cholent off the fire, I have kavanah to put it back on. He helps once a year, he said. Well, that's what he timed. I remember a newly married couple. The husband knocks on my door one time. He says to me, "Oy vavoi, I made such a mistake. He came with the Hilchos Bracha Shaila. What was his Shaila? His Shaila was he was newly married, so he wanted to help his wife. Not that when you're not newly married, you don't have to help your wife. But anyway, he wanted to help his wife, and he wanted to serve the meal. He says, my dear wife, you sit down, I'm going to serve the Suda. So he comes in with the pot, the chicken soup, and she's like, that's not the chicken soup, that's the cholent. Now, he's a regular Shiva Bacha, what did he know, right? So he said, oh no, we're stuck, can't put it back on now, I've got taken off the cholent for tomorrow, so I'll have the chicken soup, I guess, tomorrow. So he knocked on my door. What was his shaila? Nothing to do with the Shabbos, because he had no idea that he could actually maybe return it. His shaila was Hilchos Brachos. You have to make a bracha on the cholent to the Suda. Huh? Because the Shulchan Aruch passes the Hilchos Brachos that if someone brings you something that has no shaykhs to the Suda that you weren't expecting, you have to make a bracha, even if it's something that generally would not require a bracha. Are you with me? Gavaldik. So that was a shaila. I told him anyway, you're allowed to put it back because even if you're missing that tonight, it's okay. And the third one, very important, is there has to be a blech. A blech, by the way, again, a big obvious mistake people make with crock pots is they think as long as you've got a sheet of aluminum foil on the bottom, then you are okay. It's not true, by the way, because I guess none of you have spent your time, like I have, of opening up crock pots. That's what I do with my time. What can I do? So I open up the crock pot and I see that the heating element is around. It's not even on the bottom, it's around. Which means if you don't have a blech around the whole thing, you ain't got no blech. Which basically means you cannot put it back. If you do, you've got a problem, which is that the food becomes asa. So all those conditions you need, obviously it's got to be hot, it's got to be mavusha called tzorkoi, and it's got to have a blech. When you have that, then avada, you can enjoy your gavaldige cholent in that case, Rabbi Say. We should be to eat from food that is kosher, but also to make sure that the food that we have has gone through all the halachas. Have a gavaldige Shabbos.